Coventry City were introduced to top-flight English football in 1967 and just never left. They even won the Cup in 87. The question now was, how would the 9 lives of Coventry City fare when the Premier League came around?
Oh, it's the second goal by Paul Williams!
They inhabited the same decade less than 24 months prior, but the John Sillett era at Coventry City seemed a long way away. It was he who delivered the first and only major trophy in Coventry's history in one of the FA Cup's most famous finals in 1987. It was he who was in with a whisker of recording the club's highest ever league finish 2 years later, and he who nearly returned the club to Wembley a year beyond that via the League Cup. He truly did pick up the ball that Jimmy Hill got rolling all the way back in the early 1960s and sent it into the stratosphere. And then Coventry City shat the bed. In November 1990, John Sillett was sensationally sacked with the club 14th in the First Division after just 12 games. It came at a time when he had thrown around the idea that senior players be promoted in order to create a coaching pathway as the English Super League loomed large on the horizon. Now, you might understand the sacking if the club had somebody undeniable lined up as his successor. Instead, Terry Butcher was awarded the player-manager role in his first ever managerial job. Whilst he managed a mere 6 league matches before retiring from playing, it was clear he had no time for the history of the club. In almost every metric, the 1991 campaign was a regression. 4 places and 5 points lower in the league by the time Butcher was inevitably sacked in January 92. Coventry still languished perpetually on the brink of a relegation dogfight. Don Howe, one of English football's most respected coaches, filled the gap and took Coventry from 16th all the way down to 19th and a mere 2 points from safety. He would quickly leave through the back door, citing his lengthy commute from the capital. So who was left to manage Coventry City as the Premier League was all set to begin? Enter Bobby Gould. Gould knew all about Coventry City, having first been attached to the club via Jimmy Hill in signing professional forms in 1964. He'd carve out a healthy goal every other game for the club before moving on, eventually returning as the manager in the mid-80s. He was the man who had brought talent through such as Steve Agrizovic and Cyril Regis, but performances on the field hadn't quite taken and he was ultimately sacked in late 84. He would be returning for what they were calling a whole new ball game.
Good run. Oh, a nice early ball in from him, and 9
on for Cundy. And early drama and a goal for Coventry.
David Smith gets a lucky rebound. No cross coming over. Mickey Chinnis there. Can he turn? Shot by Mickey Chinnis. Got him.
A whole new ball game, but the same old Coventry City upsetting the odds as they sauntered to the top of the new league after 3 matches. Bobby Gould's mantra was to sign up-and-coming players who were starving for a top-flight chance. In this vein, he acquired John Williams and Phil Babb for a combined $750,000. He operated on a direct game that made the best out of Peter and Love up top, whilst Williams had clearly hit the ground running, netting a goal a game from the first 3 league outings. Whilst Mickey Ginn had the unfortunate honour of becoming the first Premier League player to miss a penalty in Cov's win at White Hart Lane, he'd more than make up for it with a goal at Wimbledon 3 days later. The Sky Blues would ultimately lose just 2 of their first 12 fixtures, albeit trailing off from their frantic start to win only 3 in advance of the ultimate indignity on the seaside in the League Cup.
They wipe the floor with the top flight team in the last quarter of a pulsating cup tie. Tommy Mooney got the first of 3 tremendous goals.
It wasn't just elimination, it was the overturning of a 2-goal deficit into a 3-0 defeat that irked Coventry fans. It took until Christmas week for them to find themselves on the right end of a scoreline. So despite a rich vein of goal-scoring form from the mid-season acquisition of Mickey Quinn, who bagged 6 in 4 games that generated 3 draws and a defeat, Coventry were languishing in mid-table closer to the drop than in any kind of form. Then Liverpool showed up at Highfield Road.
Will take this penalty, and he puts Coventry this free kick, which is teed up for Brian Burrows to hit. Brilliant strike, 3 for Coventry. It is. And that's a good cross as well. Fabulous goal. William Barras, Liverpool. That's over the top of the keeper. Rosario's header. Quinn gets another. It's 5 for Coventry.
A Boxing Day thumping of early contenders Aston Villa followed as Coventry ended the day a mere 8 points off the surprise Norwich City pace, with defending champions Leeds battling relegation. As usual suspects Arsenal, Liverpool, Spurs and Forest were all floundering. The league was anybody's game. The signing of Quinn had opened up a way back into the first team for Robert Rosario, unlocking some good form out of the one-time Cyril Regis successor. As January became February, Cov were winning far more than they were losing, and after a win up at Middlesbrough, they were sat as high as 4th. Unfortunately, they would never see the like of this again this late into a Premier League season.
So the goal at the other end from Mark Ward. The Reds got their revenge.
What had been a pipe dream outside chance of a title bid, or more realistically a half-hearted tilt at European qualification, had been a tanking of form amidst the sale of Rosario to the even more doomed Nottingham Forest. He left the club 5th, Coventry left the season only 3 points ahead of the drop. Kevin Gallagher was sold in a move which saw Roy Wergeley and a comparatively insignificant amount of cash come to Highfield Road. Talk about tanking your own season. Still, there's always a second chance to make a good first impression, as Bobby Gould toughened his players up pre-season at an army barracks in Aldershot, putting his team through their paces 6 AM till 10 PM. It worked for some, for others like Lee Hurst less so, as he ruptured a knee ligament whilst vaulting an obstacle, an injury which would end his footballing career. Phil Neal joined Gould for the second Premier League season as he worked concurrently for the England national team under the same premise. After all, he wouldn't have much meaningful work to do after England's failure to qualify for USA 94. That plus a documentary on Graham Taylor's time with the national team hardly shone the best light on Neal's character as an absolute yes man, as parried to absolute perfection by Bradley Walsh in Mike Bassett, England manager some years later. Either way, Mick Harford was the experienced name coming in, for 200 grand from Sunderland as 2 club men in Andy Pearce and Mickey Ginn departed. It took 10 minutes of the 93-94 season for Stuart Robson, now best known for his inane ramblings on FIFA, to put an effective end to his career when he joined Hurst in rupturing a knee ligament. However, it was a dark cloud on an otherwise sunny start to the season for Cov.
Here's Wegley giving them a problem, and Quinn is there again!
Harford's on the far post. Mick Harford.
John Williams through the gate, the game's only goal.
8 games unbeaten, the league title, here we come, except those 3 victories were the only ones forthcoming for the Sky Blues, and they wouldn't win again until firework night had come and gone. And by then, Coventry City had a different manager.
Wilkins with the ball in. Ferdinand with the header. And it's Barker. 5-1 to QPR.
This was the game that signalled the end of Bobby Gould at Coventry City, foreshadowing Kevin Keegan in the not too distant future. He called it a day within the literal bowels, resigning to Coventry's chairman in the toilet of a director's box. The season was by no means unsalvageable. Coventry had lost just 3 times from 12 games and sat a typically nonplussed 13th. In line for a promotion, Phil Neal, who made the immediate decision to recall club legend Steve Agrizovic in for Bobby Gould's kid in net. The results soon followed.
Quinn has got the better of him, and Quinn!
To float one in. And the header comes in, it's there!
A new dawn, a new year, and Coventry was safely housed in the division, unflinching in 13th place. A 0-0 draw at Hillsborough had confirmed Neal's permanent position as City manager in late November. As more capital scalps were taken, Coventry found the twin ideas of doomed Swindon and title-chasing teams Newcastle and Liverpool generating the same results.
And he's put it in the same place.
Looking to go through Beardsley.
Now giving it to Rush. Oh, great finish.
All it did was speak to what Coventry had always been, an inconsistent team who were ultimately too strong for the embarrassment of a relegation. In fact, they even strengthened the more the season went on, ending undefeated and improving upon the position and points tally of Bobby Gould the prior season.
John going for early parry.
Peter Unlov's kick just made it past Eric Torsfeld.
Derby.
And a 2-minute spell after half an hour.
It was the line in the sand for the club. The 1994 World Cup was effectively marking the 94-95 season, what with its last 22-team campaign and influx of foreign talent, as the first true Premier League season. Peter Atherton and Phil Babb quickly left, but it was a summer marked by the arrival of a certain Dion Dublin from Manchester United that created the biggest buzz. The 1.9 million rated front man would be hoping it was stairs leading up to the top half of the table. Instead, a very different start to the campaign. Ultimately, it was a season that never really got going for Coventry City and especially Phil Neal, who was sacked on Valentine's Day despite a recent win at Coventry City and USA international Kobe Jones finally clicking into gear. However, with the club only a point away from the expanded relegation zone, the club felt drastic measures were needed to be taken. Cov were facing their first real fight, and with 3 months out until the end of the season, something was needed fast to stem their flow back into the Football League.
Sit there and look and play with all your silly machines as much as you like.
Yeah, that's right, it's Big Ron manager time. Ron Atkinson was puzzlingly sacked by Aston Villa in the latter months of '94, only a few months after taking the club to the League Cup trophy. Villa's loss, Coventry's gain. He began life in the Highfield Road dugout swimmingly. West Ham and Leicester beaten before 3 draws and the now customary triumph over Liverpool as Peter Love became the first visiting player to score a hat-trick at Anfield since Terry Alcock performed the same feat for Norwich, but in a 5-4 loss in 1962. And whilst that kind of form was never gonna last, they chucked in a win over Spurs for good measure before signing off 16th of 22 teams. The easing off of the gas sadly continued into the subsequent season.
Shearer's in there.
David Buist deflected in.
Pallister, Owen, yes!
Big trouble in Little Cov, just the one win in their first 16 matches inclusive of shipping 5 at Blackburn, 4 at Wednesday and 4 at home to Man United. They were cut adrift 4 points from safety with the festive season in full swing. This despite the defensive acquisition of David Burrows for £1 million, the returning of his former Villa captain Kevin Richardson for £300k and the experience of Gordon Strachan coming in as Ron Atkinson's player assistant. The Sky Blues even had the distinction of signing the first ever Brazilian in Premier League history, courtesy of Azaias' $500,000 move. His was a time that was checkered by injury, however. Whilst a move for Wolves' prolific Steve Bull proved prohibitive, they did capture the trio of Paul Telfer, Paul Williams and John Solako. And they might have added Chris Coleman to a new defensive lineup that also contained Richard Shaw, had this scoreline not rattled Blackburn Rovers.
Good deep cross, back in again, and there's the goal for Bootable before this. Lovely flick over himself. Whips up there to the far post. Owen, Peter and Love. He's got past one. He's beaten 3 now, and Love. And Blackburn again struggled to get it clear. Solako's in there, John Solako.
They were so spooked by that particular scoreline as the defence of their championship unravelled that they broke the bank to pip Cov to the Coleman signature. The mini revival continued thanks to the acquisition of a more forward-thinking man, Noel Whelan, who bagged in 7 points either side of Christmas against Everton, Bolton and Southampton. It proved a mere respite. The Sky Blues wouldn't win again until February when Whelan struck another winner, this time against Chelsea. Atkinson kept wheeling and dealing until he couldn't no more. Liam Dyche and Owen Jess for a combined £3.5 million, but Coventry remained in the drop zone. As they entered April and their final 6 fixtures, Coventry was still wedded to the drop. Then they began their great escape.
Whelan at the far post, and Love is looking for him now. Whelan!
Cross. Dublin waiting. Then Jess pops in front.
Play wide, Pickering. Ball in, Peter and Love, he's done it!
10 points from the last 5 games. They needed every last one of them as they entered the final weekend and the visit of Leeds United only above the dotted line on goal difference. Of course, they were best placed preying on at least one of Southampton or Manchester City to slip up, as Highfield Road remained goalless on the final day. While Southampton's 0-0 draw ensured Coventry City's safety anyway, the headline from the final day will always remain Manchester City playing for a draw when they needed to win, thus sealing their own fate with a draw of their own against Liverpool. 53 weeks later, Coventry found themselves in an even worse position going into the final day. Again, they had made a rotten start of 1 win from 16 before a brief Christmas interlude offered respite. When that arrived, Ron Atkinson had been notified that his time at Highfield Road was over. The plan had always been to allow Gordon Strachan some coaching experience before taking over from Atkinson, preferably closer to the new millennium. But hey, here they were, Strachan announced as the club's new manager. Spoiler, he'd deal a bit better than Terry Butcher in his first managerial job. This time Coventry's relegation hero was Newcastle United cast-off Darren Huckabee, who provided a blistering pace that Premier League defenders simply were not used to. He'd scored the club's only winning goal in the first 3 months of 1997 against a similarly doomed Nottingham Forest, where fate had cruelly robbed the Sky Blues of Gary Boost owing to the most shocking injury in perhaps football history. It had also bestowed them the metronomic gift of Gary McAllister. Pretty much a year to the day where Coventry's survival fight began in 96, so it began in 97 and against the same opposition as well. With a Liverpool title bid tossed to the bonfire and an arrogant Chelsea defeated wearing Coventry's rancid purple chain strip, the Great Escape was on. Or at least it should have been, had only 2 points been gleaned from matches against Southampton and Arsenal, as well as a sickening late defeat at home to Derby County. Coventry began the final day in the drop zone, and that was one thing, but needing to leapfrog 2 teams into safety was another. Maybe a good omen was the fact that they would have already had their relegation confirmed if Middlesbrough hadn't been docked points for failing to fulfil a December fixture against Blackburn. On the back of such mysticism is the impossible made possible. Coventry travelled down to White Hart Lane, a positive enough haunt, needing a win and favours from the opponents of both Sunderland and Middlesbrough.
Dublin! Oh, Dion Dublin! Oh, it's the second goal by Paul Williams! Sheringham takes it and struck it wonderfully! Yes!
And Jason Ewell, a great chance, and a goal!
The greatest of great escapes sealed what now? The last of their 9 lives or the continuation of Coventry's fairy tale top flight run? To make sure things were different, Cov cast their scouting net a little wider, namely to Scandinavia to pluck the trio of Trond Egil Saltfeldt, Magnus Hedman and Roland Nilsson, whilst flogging Peter and Love for the same amount as those signings cost. Come Christmas Day, however, with only 5 wins to their name and the talismanic Gary McAllister out for the rest of the season, it seemed like same old, same old. But with the signing of Dutchman George Boateng, Coventry found another midfield gem, and then Dion Dublin began to hit his much promised peak.
Beautifully placed. Crossbar defender. Oh, what a goal that was from... Oh, it's a bit of a mix-up. This is Boateng, and Boateng scores!
The signing of Viral Moldovan costing a club record £3.25 million will never make sense when Dion Dublin was in golden boot form and Darren Huckabee was sure to follow in his footsteps. Thankfully, the Romanian's performances at France 98 ensured a quick Coventry profit. An even quicker profit was generated from Robert Yarni, who signed from Real Betis for £2.6 million, only to be sold to Real Madrid 2 weeks later for £3.4 million. I think it's called money laundering. And whilst John Aloisi and Wolves' Steve Froggatt was signed, there was simply no replacing the hole left behind by Dion Dublin after Aston Villa activated his release clause. Gone was the club's primary source of goals and a key dressing room figure. Up step Darren Huckabee.
By Froggatt, 2 up with him. Froggatt goes for goal!
Boateng is coming in, and Coventry have scored!
An unspectacular if safe and solid foundation for the future, even if Coventry hemorrhaged yet another star in George Boateng, spinning yet another absolutely massive profit, £4 million in doing so. But if Villa were routinely poaching stars from Coventry, the Midlands footballing food chain demanded that Strachan went and pinched a Wolves talent. Robbie Keane would do very nicely. Alas, he wouldn't be replacing just Dublin's goals but Huckabee's as well, as he was flogged to Leeds United for £5.5 million, another mind-melting profit in a less moneyed age. He wouldn't be alone, as the club were revitalised by yet more astute scouting thanks to the Moroccan pair of Youssef Chippo and Mustafa Hadji ahead of the 1999-2000 season. Just forget about Stefano Gioacchini. Answers on a postcard, please. And just as crucial was the shrewd signing of the ancient Carlton Palmer. Without further ado, these are just some of the highlights in another safe but sensible season of Coventry City soccer.
Still the newcomer. Oh, and he's got it!
Twice. Roussel. Keane! McAllister. Very open field for the first 2 minutes here. Deflected goal for Coventry.
They simply just could not keep regurgitating in the transfer market and surviving. The death knell would come that summer with the departures of Robbie Keane to Inter Milan and Gary McAllister to Liverpool. Their destinations just show how important they had become to Coventry. Cedric Roussel was good but not good enough, and whilst the aforementioned player sales hurt Coventry deeply, just as keenly felt was the long-term injury suffered by Steve Froggatt at home to Sunderland in February, which would end his career at the top of English football. Coventry went into the 2000-2001 season having gone the previous campaign having not won a Premier League game away from home since April '99. But like London buses, that would be remedied double in the first weeks of the season.
Gould and Strachan thinks a change of coach drivers done the trick, although Richard Edghill's rush of blood was a contributory factor.
Craig Bellamy, scorer in successive Coventry away day triumphs at the Dell Main Road, the latest cab off the rank to try and propel the Sky Blues upwards. He'd be joined by compatriot John Hartson as the season quickly reverted to type. Coventry being at the wrong end of the table, despite the Welsh pair being joined by David Thompson and Lee Carsley. Gordon Strachan would later reveal that he had attempted to resign midway through the doomed season that would ultimately be Coventry's last in the Premier League at the time of writing. While Strachan would be talked out of his departure, Youssef Chippo was also unsettled by transfer talk linking him to Newcastle, and the last of Coventry's 9 lives were evident.
After 10 escapes on the closing day of the season down the years, they haven't quite managed it this time, but they went down fighting here.
Villa Park was a nightmarish ground to visit at the best of times, but having seen a 2-goal lead turned into a defeat combined with a Middlesbrough draw against Bradford, Coventry's 34-year association with top-level football was over. If you're just finding us and don't know what we're doing, this is part of a 100 video series detailing the rich history of British football from lesser told stories to the might of the old firm up north.